If you were to take an X-ray of a fairly active 30-year-old's knee and you just put it right next to an X-ray of a 50-year-old's knee, you might actually be pretty surprised by what you see.
Or, well, what you don't see, really.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Because the bones themselves might look, nearly identical. The structural architecture could be completely intact.
Yes, structurally, there might be zero difference on the film.
So it begs the question, why does one of those knees feel super springy and resilient, while the other, it literally screams in protest the second you try to stand up from a low chair?
It's a great question.
Mm.
And the answer isn't in the bones at all.
No, it's not in the solid structures. The secret actually hides in the negative space on that X-ray, like the dark, invisible gaps between the bones, because the difference between those two knees isn't about what has worn away, it's about what has essentially dried up.
What's fascinating here is how entirely that shifts our understanding of mobility. We have spent decades culturally conditioned to view our joints purely through this mechanical structural lens.
Totally. Well, welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission today is to explore a really detailed review of a doctor-formulated joint supplement. It's called Joint Genesis. And we're digging into the provided review to understand this fundamental biological mystery. Like, why do our joints get so incredibly stiff and difficult to manage after we cross that 40-year threshold?
Yeah, it's like a biological switch flips.
Right. So we are going to evaluate the specific logic this product uses compared to the traditional advice we've all been given for years. And we're going to break down the actual microscopic science of joint hydration.
Which is much more complex than people realize.
Oh, absolutely. So think about your own morning routine for a second. When you step out of bed, are your knees or hips already arguing with you before you've even reached the coffee maker? Do you find yourself just avoiding certain movements because of that lingering tightness?
I think a lot of people can relate to that feeling of being a rusty hinge.
Definitely. Okay, let's unpack this. Because the source material we are looking at today challenges the entire concept of inevitable wear and tear.
Yeah, the core premise presented in this review asks us to completely abandon the idea that joint pain is just this unavoidable tax of gravity and time. We usually assume that getting older means the cartilage just grinds down until there's nothing left.
Like brake pads on a car.
Exactly like brake pads. But the emerging research highlighted here suggests the real culprit is a dramatic loss of lubrication. The biological environment inside the joint is, quite literally, dehydrating.
Okay, I have to push back on that immediately because when I hear dehydrated, my very first thought is just, well, drinking more water. I drink a gallon of water a day. How can a specific joint in my body be isolated and dry if I am systemically hydrated?
That is the perfect question. Because we aren't talking about plain water here. We are talking about synovial fluid.
Okay, synovial fluid.
Right. A healthy joint is not just two bones rubbing against a piece of cartilage in an open space. It is a highly sophisticated, encapsulated environment. You have to think of it like a sealed biological vault.
A vault? Okay, I like that visual.
And inside that vault is the synovial membrane. Its whole job is to produce this highly specialized viscous liquid called synovial fluid. And this fluid is essentially a non-Newtonian substance, meaning it actually changes its thickness based on the pressure applied to it.
Oh, wow. So it's not just splashing around like water in a bucket. It's a highly engineered substance doing a really specific job.
Very specific. Actually, the best way to visualize the mechanics of a joint isn't an engine or a door hinge. It's a wet sponge.
A sponge.
Yeah, the cartilage at the ends of your bones is porous, like a sponge. When the joint is perfectly healthy, that cartilage is just soaking in thick, viscous synovial fluid. When you take a step and put weight on the joint, the pressure squeezes the sponge, absorbing the massive shock of your body weight.
And then when you take the weight off.
When you lift your foot, the sponge expands and sucks the fluid right back in.
That makes total sense. So if the fluid is doing its job, the cartilage itself is barely taking any actual damage.
Exactly. The fluid takes the hit. When your joints are properly lubricated with this thick fluid, motion feels incredibly smooth, your flexibility is maximized, and friction is essentially non-existent. But as we age, the body's ability to maintain the thickness and volume of that healthy fluid naturally drops.
The sponge starts to dry out.
Yeah, and a dry sponge behaves very differently under pressure than a wet one.
If you step on a wet sponge, it compresses and bounces back.
Right, but if you step heavily on a completely bone-dry sponge, the brittle fibers crush, they snap, and they break. The friction increases exponentially. The cartilage begins to experience shear forces it was never, ever designed to handle without a buffer.
Ouch.
Yeah. Your flexibility plummets because the joint literally cannot glide, and that very familiar, frustrating stiffness sets in.
Which means the actual damage to the cartilage is the result of the problem, not the beginning of the problem. That completely flips the script.
It really does.
But it leaves a massive missing link. If a lack of this thick fluid is the root cause, what is actually controlling the thickness of the fluid? Like, why does the biological vault suddenly stop keeping the sponge wet?
So to understand the failure of the system, the source introduces us to the star molecule of this entire biological process,
Yeah.
and that is hyaluronic acid.
Oh, okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because the second I read hyaluronic acid in the source text, my mind immediately went to the cosmetics aisle.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, the review specifically mentions that hyaluronic acid also plays a major role in skin hydration and eye moisture. And I know for a fact that hyaluronic acid is like the premium ingredient in incredibly expensive skincare serums. Are we basically saying our knees need the exact same hydration routine as our faces?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we see that the human body is incredibly efficient. It doesn't invent a brand new molecule for every single system. It uses hyaluronic acid universally as its master moisture retention system.
Wow.
So what is happening on your face is mirroring exactly what is happening inside your knee capsule.
I need to understand how that actually works on a microscopic level. How does one acid do all of that?
Well, hyaluronic acid is technically a glycosaminoglycan, which is
Oh, what now?
a glycosaminoglycan. It's basically a massive, tangled chain of carbohydrates. And its defining characteristic is its molecular weight and its physical structure. It acts like a microscopic magnet for water. In fact, a single molecule of hyaluronic acid can bind to and hold up to 1,000 times its own weight in water.
1,000 times. That is staggering. It's like a molecular mop.
It really is. It creates this gel-like substance wherever it exists. When you are 20, your cellular factories, which are called fibroblasts, they are pumping out massive amounts of hyaluronic acid.
Right.
So in your skin, that HA hold on to water, keeping the dermis plump, elastic, wrinkle-free.
Mm.
In your eyes, it maintains the thick, clear, vitreous humor so your eyes feel comfortably moist. And inside your joint capsule, it binds with water to create that thick, slippery, shock-absorbing synovial fluid we just talked about.
So what happens at 40? Do the cellular factories just go on strike?
They drastically slow down production. The enzyme activity that creates HA drops, while the enzymes that break it down actually become more active.
Oh, that's a bad combination.
It is. And the systemic results are unavoidable. The skin loses its elasticity and begins to fold. The eyes might start feeling gritty by the end of the day. And crucial to the source material, the synovial fluid inside the joints thins out. It loses its viscosity. It becomes watery and, well, ineffective.
Yeah. So what does this all mean? It means the structural hardware of the joint, the bones and the cartilage, might actually be in perfectly decent shape, but the biological software, the lubrication system, is failing.
Exactly. The water is there, but without the hyaluronic acid, the joint can't hold on to it.
The mechanism of shock absorption just breaks down. That's when you start experiencing the audible grinding, right? The popping every time you bend down, and that severely reduced mobility. It is literally a hydration crisis at the molecular level.
That is the perfect way to phrase it.
Okay, so having identified the exact mechanical failure here, this systemic loss of hyaluronic acid and the resulting dry joints, we really need to look at how the Joint Genesis supplement attempts to solve this specific problem. Because the review makes a very strong point of comparing this specific approach to older, more traditional methods.
Yeah, the contrast drawn in the source material is really stark. I mean, standard joint supplements, the ones you've likely seen on pharmacy shelves for decades, are typically built around compounds like basic glucosamine or chondroitin.
Right, the classics.
Yeah, and their traditional mechanism of action is trying to provide the raw building blocks for cartilage.
So they are hyper-focused on the structural wear and tear. They are essentially trying to build more sponge. But according to the logic presented in this review, building more sponge doesn't help at all if the environment is still bone dry.
That is exactly the argument the text makes, based on Ivy League research. This product takes a lubrication approach. The stated goal is not to just throw cartilage building blocks into a joint that is already experiencing catastrophic friction.
Because it'll just grind away the new stuff, too.
Exactly. The strategy is to replenish the hydration, to rebuild the hyaluronic acid levels, and to restore the viscosity of the synovial fluid from the inside out.
Let's evaluate that claim critically, because, as you know, there's a ton of noise in the supplement industry. According to the review's logic, traditional supplements are essentially putting a Band-Aid on the issue by targeting the damaged tissue, whereas this formula claims to target the root biological environment.
Right.
And I just want to pause and make it very clear to the listener, we are not endorsing this product or telling you it's a magic cure. We are simply evaluating the logic of treating the root cause, which is hydration, versus surface level symptoms, like the cartilage. We're impartially reporting on the claims here.
Absolutely. We're looking at the biological rationale, and biomechanically, it comes down to the friction coefficient.
Okay, break that down for me.
Even a perfectly designed, flawlessly healthy piece of cartilage will struggle, it'll heat up, and eventually shear apart if there isn't enough cushioning fluid around it. If you only focus on feeding the cartilage, you are completely ignoring the hostile environment the cartilage lives in.
Yeah, it's like painting over rust.
Yes. The joint genesis concept is built on the premise that if you fix the fluid dynamics, if you restore the healthy lubrication, the mechanical friction drops back to normal, safe levels. And that allows the entire system to function naturally.
That makes an incredible amount of logical sense. I mean, you have to put out the fire before you try to rebuild the house.
Right.
But, a supplement isn't magic. It's a formula in a bottle that has to survive the digestive tract and make its way to the joint. So I want to transition from the grand promises of mobility to the reality of the ingredients. What are the actual mechanisms the review highlights in this formula?
So the review breaks the formula down into 3 distinct biological targets, and all of them are designed to support this lubrication strategy and the overall health of the joint capsule.
The first target is obviously hyaluronic acid support. The goal here is to introduce specific compounds that either provide HA directly or stimulate the body's natural ability to maintain those moisture levels, thereby, thickening up that synovial fluid.
Correct. And the second target involves joint comfort nutrients. These are botanical ingredients traditionally used to support mobility and the health of the connective tissues themselves. So they're essentially providing support to the biological vault while the hydration levels are being addressed.
Got it. And the third target, which I found surprisingly technical when I read it, is antioxidant support.
Ah, yes.
The text points out that oxidative stress can severely impact joint health over time. But I need you to explain this to me. Why would a joint, which we just established is a sealed valve, be suffering from oxidative stress in the first place? Like, where is the stress even coming from?
That requires looking at another really fascinating quirk of human biology. Cartilage is avascular.
Avascular, meaning no blood vessels.
Exactly. It has almost no direct blood supply. Blood vessels don't weave through it the way they do in your muscles or your organs.
Wait, so how does the tissue stay alive?
Through diffusion from the synovial fluid.
Oh.
Remember the sponge analogy?
Yeah. Squeezing the sponge.
Right. When you step down and compress the cartilage, you aren't just absorbing shock. You are mechanically squeezing cellular waste products out of the tissue.
Unbelievable.
And when you lift your foot, the cartilage expands and sucks in fresh nutrients from the fluid. But when a joint is dry and grinding, the friction creates massive amounts of cellular damage and free radicals.
And because there's no blood flow to flush it away, the trash just builds up inside the vault.
Exactly. The waste gets trapped. Those free radicals just bounce around inside the joint capsule, causing severe oxidative stress and inflammation. And that inflammation further degrades whatever hyaluronic acid is left.
It's a complete vicious cycle.
It really is. So the antioxidants in the formula are there to attempt to neutralize those free radicals and stop that cascading damage to the tissue.
Okay, so it's a three-pronged biological approach. But the review includes a crucial reality check about expectations, and we really cannot ignore that.
Oh, for sure. It emphasizes heavily that rebuilding an entire biological environment is not an overnight process. Rehydrating a sealed avascular system takes significant time.
Right, you don't take a pill on Tuesday and sign up for a marathon on Wednesday. The results, according to the text, depend entirely on consistency, the user's baseline age, and the extent of the dryness in the joints.
Furthermore, it requires active participation from the user. You can't just rely on the supplement. The source lists several lifestyle factors necessary to create a physiological environment where any supplement could potentially work.
Yeah, things like maintaining a healthy weight to reduce the sheer mechanical load, staying generally hydrated, prioritizing sleep for tissue repair, and eating anti-inflammatory whole foods.
Standard but vital health practices.
All that tracks logically, but there is one lifestyle tip buried in the review that really stopped me in my tracks, and I want to zero in on this claim about movement. If my knees are grinding, if they feel dry, and every single step sends a sharp warning signal to my brain, My absolute first instinct is to sit on the couch and not move. Protect the joint. Right.
Very common reaction.
But the text specifically states that gentle movement actually helps stiffness more than complete rest. How does that make sense? Aren't you just causing more friction on a dry sponge?
This raises an important question, and it highlights one of the most profound ironies of human physiology. We assume that resting a painful joint is the ultimate way to protect it. But we have to go back to the fluid dynamics we just discussed. Because the joint lacks a blood supply, it relies entirely on physical movement to survive.
The mechanical pump.
Exactly. Movement is the exact mechanical pump the body uses to circulate synovial fluid through the joint capsule. When you bend, flex, and walk, you are physically driving hydration deep into the cartilage tissues and flushing out that oxidative waste.
Wow. So by sitting completely still on the couch to avoid the pain.
You are actively stalling the diffusion process. You are starving the joint of the very lubrication it desperately needs to stop hurting, and you are trapping all that inflammatory waste inside the capsule.
That is an incredible, tragic catch-22. Avoiding movement out of fear of pain ensures the joint remains dry, which basically guarantees it will hurt even more the next time you are forced to move.
That is precisely why the review stresses that gentle, consistent movement, things like swimming, walking, or cycling paired with hydration support, is absolutely critical to breaking the cycle. The joint literally needs motion to lubricate itself.
That is a massive takeaway. Let's summarize the paradigm shift we've unpacked today because this really reframes how we should be treating our bodies. We've learned that maintaining joint health after 40 is not just a stubborn battle to preserve bone and cartilage against inevitable decay.
Not at all.
It's heavily reliant on maintaining internal hydration. It's about supporting the body's natural moisture retention molecules, like hyaluronic acid, to keep the synovial fluid thick, viscous, and capable of absorbing shock.
The entire conversation needs to shift, from trying to rebuild the structural hardware of the joint to restoring the fluid dynamics and the biological environment of the joint.
So think about your own body right now. Are you drinking enough water? Are you feeding your body the nutrients it needs to maintain that internal moisture? And most importantly, are you moving enough to keep that biological pump working? Or are you sitting still and letting the waste build up?
If our bodies respond to movement by circulating the very fluid that makes movement possible, we really have to wonder about the broader implications of our modern desk-bound lifestyles.
Oh, that's a good point.
Are we genuinely accelerating our own joint aging simply by becoming increasingly sedentary? Is the profound aching stiffness we feel after 40 less about the actual number of years we've been alive, and more about a self-fulfilling cycle? Like a cycle where sitting at a computer all day causes the joints to dry out and stiffen, and that resulting stiffness simply causes us to sit even more.
That is a haunting thought, honestly, but an incredibly vital one to leave on. We might not just be wearing down, we might actually be drying out from a lack of use. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. As always, keep examining the information you're given, keep exploring the fascinating science of your own biology, and keep questioning the world around you. We'll catch you on the next one.